In today's session, we're going to talk about performance agreement principle and discuss the relationship between behavioral objectives and the evaluation of mastery. Stay with us, we're coming up.
You have instructional design questions. We discuss answers.
As a student of many courses in the past, one thing that always rang true for me was my end goal for taking the actual course in the first place. I wanted to learn something, and I wanted a way to prove that I actually learned it. And not only to those who may have required me to take it, but also just for myself as well. When I think of performance agreement principle, I think of checks and balances to ensure that what I set out to do and learn is actually what I ended up learning. And the agreement between objectives and evaluation mastery sits well in me, and I suspect in many of you as well. So today, Chuck and I are going to discuss performance agreement principle. So Chuck, one of the first questions that I have for you is, can you talk us through what performance agreement is and what happens when you ignore it in ISD?
Well, ignore it at your peril because it's an incredibly important principle and thing that we work with. So performance agreement to someone who is a designer already will be the relationship between objectives and evaluation tasks. For someone who is not yet a designer, is looking at this as a person who's interested in the subject or might want to someday be a designer, this is your safety valve. This is your checklist. This is your way of doing quality control on your work. The relationship between behavioral objectives and evaluation tasks is real. And you've got to make sure that what you ask for in an objective is actually going to be evaluated for mastery. And when this doesn't happen, certain things happen that you don't want to happen. You have no quality control, first of all, but your end product is usually not reliable, and it's certainly not what you want it to be. So that's why it's so important that you think about performance agreement from the perspective of quality control and making sure that what you set out to do, you actually are able to accomplish with learners.
How can somebody determine performance agreement?
Well, it's not as hard as it sounds. It just has to be thought about. So let me give you an example. I always have stories, so here's the story. I was asked to review a community college program on nursing. And this program was funded by a large hospital system who had trouble finding nurses. And I'm sure that's not an uncommon thing because burnout nurses is a real issue. And you want to be sure that you get good trained people and you get a steady supply of folks that want to do this work. And what was happening was this hospital system was finding that the students they were getting from the program didn't seem to be as prepared as they wanted them to be. So I went back, and the first place I always look when I do a program review is I look at the objectives for the courses. And all of the objectives were very well written. They were good four-part behavioral objectives. Learners should be able to take blood pressure, should be able to draw blood, should be able to, push the red button if there's a code, all the things that are part of a curriculum here. So as I started to discuss what happened in the courses, I find out that the vast majority of the students are being evaluated cognitively and not tactily. And what that means is they were asked to write how they would do a blood pressure reading, as opposed to how they would actually do it and demonstrate that skill. So they could pass the test, they could tell you exactly how to do it, but then they got actually on the job and had to start performing this and they were locking up. They were getting, I can't do this. What's wrong? Is the cuff in the right place? And just imagine that down the entire curriculum. So it ended up that, they just weren't doing the clinicals the way they need to do the clinicals in the program. They got it straightened out. They got terrific students. But performance agreement told me that I'm being asked to demonstrate in an objective and I'm asked to describe in an evaluation task. And this is a very, very, very common performance agreement problem. And you can spot it instantly when you look at it.
Yeah, and so you mentioned the cognitive function that, and also, like, could you talk a little bit about that? What do you mean exactly about there are cognitive functions? There are, what was the other word you used in terms of being able
Tactile.
to tactile? Could you talk a little
Hmm.
bit more about that? Because I
Sure.
think that in my mind is where a lot of these problems probably reside. I mean,
Yeah.
I've gone through certification courses as a hairdresser. And
Hmm.
if I didn't have that practical experience, that hands-on experience to train me how to deal with certain skin conditions or certain scalp conditions or whatnot, I'd be afraid for the person. If I came across somebody actually in the salon and I didn't know what I was looking at because I didn't have that tactile experience, so to speak.
And this is where it's important. This is a very advanced concept in instructional design. It's called objective domains. And we'll, I'm sure, now do a show on this. But this is
I'll
really
take a
important to
note.
think of it. Yeah, take notes, Madam Producer. The notion is that objectives are not a singular cognitive kind of a thing, okay? They're objectives that want you to think, they're objectives that want you to do. They're objectives that want you to reflect. So in my categorization, there are actually 4 different types of cognitive domains: tactile domains, affective domains, and Ramazowski came up with the interpersonal domain when he looked at online learning. And I asked him if I could include that in domains that I was writing about at the time. And he said yes. So you're not going to see the interpersonal domain anywhere but in my work. But the notion is each objective has a different category of things within it that are demonstratable. So cognitive is about reflecting and writing and experiencing. Tactile is, okay, I need to put my hands on it and do it clinically. So if I'm laying brick, I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to lay a line. I'm going to go out there and get 200 brick and, you know, lay out 10 foot. That's how I do it. And you get into interpersonal, it's okay, what is my relationship with other people? So if I'm a psychologist and in training, one of the cognitive domains and objective domains I'm going to think about is interpersonal. Okay, how can I write objectives that relates to how I relate to other people or a student relates to other people? And affective domain is my impressions of something. So when you're looking at art history or other things which most people have an incredibly hard time writing objectives for, if you put it in the affective domain and say, okay, I want this learner to be able to express 3 things they feel when they look at this picture. Okay, I can write an objective for that all day. But that's because I put it in the right objective domain. So look for the soon to be coming session on objective domains, but this is how you get into performance agreement. So if I've asked you to do it in a cognitive domain, I want you to evaluate in a cognitive domain. I've asked you to do something in a clinical sense at a tactile dominance, then you better have an evaluation technique that's tactile and dominance.
Can you, in a very simple way, I'm not sure if this is possible, but how you can you talk about how we can avoid making these kinds of performance agreement mistakes on a basic level?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is as you write objectives, determine exactly what you're going to have in the learner as the end product. And I always ask people to picture what this learner will be able to do when they leave your classroom or get off your screen. So describe exactly what you expect them to be able to do tomorrow. If you want them to describe something or you just want them to have background information that they can build from, fine. You know, do cognitive, just have them talk about something. But in the building trades and in most performance-based criteria courses, let's say you're going to be a paramedic. So 1,800 hours in a paramedic program. Classroom hours are going to be a small portion of that. Most of that's going to be clinical. So you're riding an ambulance, you're working in an emergency room. And when you write objectives for those things, you're not going to write them in a sense that, okay, gee whiz, tell me what's like in an emergency room. You're going to tell me, okay, what happens if you have a mass injury incident and you have to do certain things? Okay, how are you going to set this up? How are you going to triage? Show me exactly how you're going to triage by severity of injury. And I can tell you all day how to do it, but could I do it? Probably not. I mean, I've been in that field and was okay at it, but gosh, if all I did was sit in the classroom, and we used to see this too in police academies and fire academies because you spent a lot of time talking about things, but you never experienced it as a student. And one thing that we really started to push in live academies in the military and different things like that is put people in a situation that they're going to be expected to perform in. So if you want me to fight a fire, I need to be on the fire truck and working it. If I'm a police officer and I drive up on an accident, I need to know how emotionally I need to respond to that. So performance agreement guarantees that a designer has to think about this from that first objective to that evaluation task.
That makes so much sense, and that you really put it in a clear manner in terms of putting ourselves in that position where the person that is learning, they need to be able to. We have to put them in that position in our head as a designer that they need to go do this tomorrow. That was a really good way of putting that, and I think for myself, I learn by doing, and I have a really hard time sitting and just being lectured to. Now, if I need to perform, I take video production as a perfect example. I can't have somebody tell me how to do video production. Yeah, I need to be out in the field with my cameras, my lights, my mics, and putting myself in awkward positions to get the right angle for me to actually learn what I can do with a camera instead of being told what I can do with a camera. So it's that show tell aspect. And I really appreciate you bringing light to that, because I think it's such an important concept and so important. And I think also subject matter experts are really important in helping us to understand what is critical to put into these objectives in terms of cognitive, affective, interpersonal, tactile.
Well, the other thing about this too is when you look at populations, we talk about this in design plan elements, but as you do analysis, you don't just want to talk to the experts. The way I structure conversations with populations is I want an expert, I want somebody who's an intermediate, and I want somebody who just started. And I want them all to tell me their experience with this. So if I was going to talk to a videographer, let's say IATSE 644 in New York wants a training for assistant cam, okay? So what are the things I need to think about? And I'm going to talk to a head photographer, head camera person that's been, Oscar nominated. I want their view on it, right? I want to think, okay, I've been doing this a couple years, and here's what I learned the hard way. And then I want to talk to the apprentice that just showed up a week ago. And the apprentice is going to say, nobody told me I had to get up at 3 a.m. and be on location at 4. That's not fair, Chuck.
And, what are you doing?
It's cold out here.
There better be lots of coffee and donuts. And
yeah, and actors are jerks. And I mean, all the things that go with this environment, that's what a designer has got to get to. So if I'm going to take this new apprentice in motion picture production, one of the first courses I'm going to have is, okay, get real. Okay, this is what this life is like. You're not going to be warm or cold all the time. People are jerks. And, okay, now let's start about the technical stuff too. But I want to be thinking about this learner as a whole individual. Okay, what's their whole environment about? What's they going to, when they get there in the morning, what's it going to be like? So a good designer is going to go across the spectrum and look at all the different levels of proficiency and expertise, and then find that middle ground based on where your population is. So if I'm putting together a course for heads of photography, okay, I'm going to start way at the top, right? I don't need to tell them it's cold out and people are jerks. But if I'm talking to that new apprentice, I want him or her to know this is, it's not all the glamour that you may think it is. And I think that approach for instructional design, looking at populations and looking at all the elements of it, is really critical. You got to get real with this. What's the real world? What are they going to do tomorrow when they get there? And the one question I always ask the new folks is, what surprised you the most? What did you not expect? So a focus group with new people, I hear things that I frankly would never have thought of because they just experienced it. And good design is about really replicating what people are going to do when they do the work or when they apply the information.
That's great advice, Chuck, as always. I think that's a great point to close on as well. I want to thank everyone for being here with us today and for tuning in. I hope that you learned as much as I did from Chuck today, because he opened my eyes to a lot of just really great, very important concepts. And we hope that you tune into our next video in the queue. And be sure to check out when we do go live. We'll be going live soon. Check out when we go live, subscribe, hit the little bell so you're notified when we do go live and when we've uploaded new information. Until then, have a great day. Thanks so much, everyone.